Land of the free, home of the brave. Yeah, right. More like the land of everything being expensive AF. And well, with all the violent crime and mass shootings going on, I guess you would have to be pretty brave to live there. Gen Z is less patriotic and less proud to be American than any other generation by far. Older generations have criticized Gen Z for this. A millennial presidential candidate even went as far as suggesting mandatory military service for Gen Z. To me, though, the only takeaway from this is that, once again, it's further proof that Gen Z is the smartest generation by far. Growing up as a millennial in the American school system was a really strange experience when I look back on it. The insane amounts of American propaganda being shoved down our throats every day is something that I can only describe as brainwashing and indoctrination. Every morning, you'd have to pledge allegiance to the flag. You were told that America was the greatest nation on earth. And when you started history class, this was when things got really batshit crazy. Apparently, America won every war it ever fought, was always the good guy. Everyone else was always wrong, and America never did anything bad at all, ever in its entire history. To be fair, this was before the internet existed to expose the truth, and America was still a decent country back then. But even as a young child back then, I couldn't help but think something was off. I mean, you were always the good guy for 250 years in a row? A bit hard to believe, but okay, whatever. Now fast forward to the early 2010s, when I was roughly the same age as most of you watching. The 2008 financial crash significantly cratered the quality of life in America. My generation was particularly screwed, and I was desperately looking for a solution. Thankfully, by then, the internet and information era was just getting underway, and I found my way onto Reddit, where I started to learn about how things were actually much better in other countries. Free college, universal health care, better infrastructure, and overall lower cost of living. That is when I unplugged from the Matrix, and the American propaganda machine came down crumbling like a house of cards. So, this brings us to the title of this video. Should Gen Z leave America? A lot of this is obviously going to vary based on the individual, but I'm going to be making the case that you should absolutely at least consider it. Reason number 1, finances. During my travels, a lot of American friends would always ask me, how was I able to afford traveling to all these cool places? And my response was, I should be the one asking you, how are you able to afford living in America? Keep in mind, this was in the 2010s, before this massive inflation happened. So this is even more relevant today than it was back then. I don't see how anyone is able to afford these absurd rent prices today. And it's not just rent, as people have pointed out. Groceries and other basic living expenses have skyrocketed as well. These are non-negotiable living expenses. These aren't things that you can just cut back on. You need a place to live and to eat food to survive. It's crazy because, in my last video, you had some delusional boomers literally make the case that Gen Z is spoiled because they could just live out of their car if rent is too expensive. It's insane how batshit crazy this country has gotten, that we're literally calling people lazy and entitled for not wanting to live in your car. Americans will sometimes make the case that things like electronics, for example, are cheaper in America. I'm not gonna lie, this is perhaps the dumbest argument I've ever heard. What's the point of a laptop or TV being cheaper when you literally don't have a house to live in? Where are you even gonna use the laptop or TV? With how absurdly expensive everything in America has gotten, it's time for a mindset shift. Traveling or moving abroad isn't what's expensive. Living in America is. My friends and I who moved abroad all live comfortably on less than $1,000 a month right now. Unless you're some hyper-competitive top 1% businessman, America is likely way too expensive for you to stay in. Reason number 2, safety. Whether you want to blame the right or the left, I don't really care. But between high crime rates, mass shootings, and the general erosion of social values, America is straight up not a safe place to live in anymore. There's a lot of propaganda about how every country outside of America is some ghetto third world communist country. Though with the rapid spread of information on the internet these days, it's getting harder and harder to sustain that propaganda machine. This is backed up by both empirical data and anecdotal evidence. Look up violent crime stats from any reliable source, and America will be at the top of the list by a wide margin out of any developed OECD countries. And everyone who's actually traveled will tell you the exact same thing. Reason number 3, it's still relatively easy to do now, but might not be for much longer. There is one silver lining to being an American citizen with an American passport. It's exceptionally easy to get through immigration border control in most places. Generally speaking, they'll just quickly scan your passport to make sure it's real and proceed to let you in without asking any questions. I've personally been through more border checks than I can count, and I've seen people from less well-off countries absolutely be put through the ringer by immigration officers. They have to show a return ticket, proof of accommodation, answer a million questions. The list goes on. This is because, although America is on a steep decline right now, it still has some remaining momentum from its very golden days. So, since there's less risk of an American staying illegally, they don't really care. This might be changing soon, however. More and more every day, America's reputation overseas is going down the drain. It might only be a matter of time before you get the same treatment at the border as people from actual third world countries. But as of right now, you can still book a one-way ticket and get through border control without having to answer any questions. So, take advantage of it while you still can. Reason number 4, your mental health will improve tremendously as you get a fresh start on life. Like a lot of you, I grew up in a broken home that ended in divorce. One of the things that helped us a lot was just the act of moving out of that house and into a new one. There were so many bad memories and experiences inherently ingrained in our old house that just starting fresh in a new environment made a huge difference. America as a whole, for me these days, is kind of like that house of trauma and bad memories. A lot of you might not realize this, but if you've never traveled before, you're likely carrying a lot of trauma that gets reinforced by your environment. Every day living in the apartment where you constantly fear eviction, passing by all the stores and businesses that pay you like dog shit, seeing the same people who are constantly judging you, day after day, week after week, year after year. As Einstein would say, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. You will be surprised how much physically disconnecting yourself from the traumatic memories of your past will drastically improve your mental health. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about why I feel so inspired to make these videos for you guys every day. And I guess I realize the reason is because even in the short time you've been adults, Gen Z has already caused a massive cultural shift that's drastically improved my life. And at this point, I just want to give back. I remember when I first started traveling around 10 years ago, it was such a painful, teeth-pulling process whenever I talked to boomers or other millennials about it. They'd get so offended, like I just spit at them when I told them I was leaving America because it was no longer the greatest nation on earth. But something really interesting happened around 5 years ago when Gen Z came of age. When I told you guys my story, it was the complete opposite reaction. You guys thought it was the coolest thing ever. You guys wanted to learn more about it. You guys wanted to even learn how you could do it yourself. More importantly, you guys took to the internet and voiced your discontent with America as well, and you completely shifted public perception. Today, a lot of my millennial peers and boomer parents who got offended at my decision to leave have been forced to admit that I made the right choice. I got the sweetest dose of revenge ever, and it's all thanks to you. So, consider this my way of giving back. So, now that you know why you should leave America, you're probably wondering how exactly you go about doing it. My ultimate travel guide for Gen Z is coming out this weekend, so be on the lookout for that.